King James I of England was called the wisest fool in Christendom, a man who united two kingdoms but couldn't unite his own rotting body. For over 400 years, his tomb in Westminster Abbey has hidden a stomach-churning secret about his final days and the horrifying state of his corpse. What modern historians discovered when they examined his remains would shock even the plague doctors of his era. This is the disgusting truth about how the King James Bible's creator met his end. James VI of Scotland, James I of England, the king who brought two ancient enemies together under one crown in 1603. He commissioned the Bible that bears his name, survived the gunpowder plot that nearly blew him to pieces, and ruled for 22 years through plague, political chaos, and religious turmoil. But behind the royal facade was a man whose body was slowly betraying him in the most revolting ways imaginable. His courtiers whispered about his bizarre habits, his constant drooling, and the foul stenches that seemed to follow him everywhere. By 1625, James I had become a walking medical horror show. His tongue was so swollen he could barely speak. Saliva constantly dripped from his mouth, soaking his elaborate ruffs. Courtiers described how he would stuff his mouth with his fingers while eating, food falling from his lips onto his jewelled doublets. His legs were so weak from arthritis and gout that he had to be carried in a chair, his joints swollen like grotesque balloons. But the worst was yet to come. James suffered from what physicians now believe was kidney disease. His urine was described as dark as porter beer and reeked so badly that servants refused to empty his chamber pots without holding herbs to their noses. His skin broke out in running sores that wouldn't heal, weeping pus that stained his royal bedsheets. The king who had once been called handsome was now a shambling, drooling wreck whose own body had become his enemy. In March 1625, James's condition reached its horrifying climax. He was struck down with what courtiers called a fever and ague, likely dysentery combined with kidney failure. For weeks, the king lay in his own filth as his bowels turned to water. The royal physicians bled him repeatedly, weakening him further as foul-smelling blood poured from his arms. The smell in the royal chambers became unbearable. Windows were thrown open despite the cold March air, but nothing could dispel the stench of royal decay. James's face turned yellow, then grey. His breath reeked of rotting fish, a sign his kidneys had completely failed. On March 27th, after days of agony that left him screaming for relief, King James I finally died. But death would not end his body's revolt against dignity. The royal embalmers faced a nightmare. James's corpse was already beginning to bloat and discolour within hours of death. The stench was so overwhelming that the embalmers worked in shifts, covering their faces with perfumed cloths. When they opened his body, what they found inside horrified even these experienced professionals. His organs were in an advanced state of decay. His kidneys were described as corrupt and putrid, his liver spotted with disease. Unlike Elizabeth I's relatively fresh corpse, James's internal organs were so diseased they practically fell apart when touched. The embalmers had to work quickly, stuffing his hollowed body cavity with massive amounts of aromatic herbs and spices, not just to preserve him, but to mask the overwhelming stench of internal rot. The process took 3 times longer than normal because the body kept releasing new waves of putrid gases. Even after the brutal embalming process, servants reported that a sickly sweet smell of decay still clung to the sealed coffin. In 1869, the same Victorian curiosity that had led to Elizabeth I's tomb being opened reached James I. Dean Arthur Stanley, emboldened by his previous discoveries, received permission to examine the Stuart king's final resting place in Westminster Abbey's Henry VII Chapel. What Stanley found was a testament to the power of 17th century embalming and the horror of James's diseased death. Unlike many royal remains that had crumbled to dust, James's body had been so thoroughly pickled with preservatives that significant remains still existed after 244 years. But these remains told a disgusting story. The lead coffin had held its shape better than Elizabeth's, but when opened, it revealed the mummified remnants of a king whose death had been as revolting as his final years. Stanley's notes describe finding extensive evidence of disease in the preserved organs and clear signs of the corruption that had overtaken the royal body even before death. Modern historians and medical experts examining the Victorian records and contemporary accounts have pieced together the horrifying truth about James I's final illness. He likely suffered from severe kidney disease, possibly combined with diabetes, which explained his constant thirst, foul-smelling urine, and the sweet, sickly odour that clung to his body even in life. The swollen tongue, constant drooling, and difficulty speaking were signs of severe kidney failure. The running sores that wouldn't heal indicated his blood had become toxic with waste his kidneys could no longer filter. In essence, King James I spent his final years slowly poisoning himself from the inside out. The rapid decomposition after death, the diseased organs, and the extreme measures needed to preserve his corpse all point to a man whose body had become a walking laboratory of decay long before his heart stopped beating. Today, visitors to Westminster Abbey walk past James I's elaborate tomb, admiring the carved figures and reading about his achievements. The King James Bible, the unification of England and Scotland, his survival of assassination attempts. Few realise that beneath their feet lies the preserved evidence of one of history's most revolting royal deaths. The man who gave the English-speaking world its most famous Bible translation spent his final years as a living example of how disease and decay spare no one, not even kings, chosen by divine right. His tomb stands as a monument not just to his achievements, but to the universal truth that all flesh is grass and all its glory fades. James I, who believed passionately in the divine right of kings and wrote extensively about the sacred nature of royal authority, was humbled by the most democratic of all forces, biological decay. The king who united kingdoms couldn't unite his failing organs. The monarch who commanded armies couldn't command his own bladder. His rotting remains, preserved by 17th century chemistry, serve as history's most disgusting reminder that crowns cannot cure corruption and sceptres cannot stop the stench of mortality.